distracted because I'm still taking attendance. Next week, at the end of the week, there'll be a review. The week after next will be a test, and the test will be on chapter 1, 2, and 3. So next week I'll be doing 4, but during the week at the end, I'll be doing a review. Reason I'm not putting dates on the board, don't worry about it. Don't miss next week or the week after. One more time. Next week a review, the week after that a test on chapter 1, 2, and 3. When you're listening to today's lecture, this is an important part of the test. This is 1/3 of the next test. It's chapter 3. Okay, so having said that, don't be absent, don't be late. By the way, this class is pretty good for attendance. I'm not upset. I mean, you're coming to class at a regular basis and listening. A few people are in and out, but most of you are here regularly, and that's good. It pays dividends. One last time, there'll be a test early in October, which is the one coming up, and there'll be another test just before Halloween. So there'll be another test before Thanksgiving too, but the test coming up and the test before Halloween. I'm trying to see, there was another click, but I think I know who it was. All right, I think I have attendance. Oh, Lopez, Joel Lopez, you arrived. I got to give him credit of the remark absent. This taking attendance this way is a real pain in the neck, but I can't do much about it. All right, so one more time. Test next week. I'm sorry, review next week for a test the week after. All right, give me a second while I bring this up. And there it is. Now, I have several ways I can do this, as you know. But I think the way I'm going to do is what I always do, because I have so many sections I forget. I'm going to go through the first few slides fairly rapidly and slow down at the end. So we'll do the entire thing. When I get to some of the other ones, like 7, 8, or 9, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm going to do half one day and half the other. These I can overlap. Remember, Monday and Wednesday, I have to finish 3. So I did half of it. I'm going to do the other half today somehow. I hope you're enjoying this, but hint, 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 you're never going to see chapter 3 again, ever. Okay, and yet you're going to have a test on it a week after next. So pay close attention. Once the light's out, I can take my glasses off. I can relax. All right. I assume you can all see. All right, quickly. Topology is the second dot, the lay of the land, how things are laid out. So topology is the physical way the network's laid out. Just know that. Okay? I'm going a little fast for this because we've done it before. Okay. This I'll do when we get to the other slide, the difference between logical and physical. Here's the cuidado, the bottom one. Thoroughly know what a bus topology is, what its advantages and disadvantages are. Completely understand the star. Completely understand the ring, and completely understand the point-to-point. Well, the good news or the bad news is the next 10 or 15 slides are going to cover those. I'm not going to race through them, but I'm going to go a little bit more rapidly because we've seen this last time. And I can slow down near the end, all right? The bus is the old one. Here's the bus. This thing is the bus. So continuously, see that wire? That's the bus. So what does it say? Continuous length of cable. That's the old one, the one we don't do anymore. Why? Blah, 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 but here's the big one. Any break in the bus breaks down the entire network. And we're going to have to know why in the next slide coming up. So the bus is the old one that we never use. The one is daisy chained straight out. And the one we never use because any break in the bus could bring down the entire network. And here's the big slide. And there'll be several questions from a test on this slide alone. So the young ladies who asked me the question, what's on the test, here's part of it. Why is a bus bad? Well, let's try the bottom one. If I don't terminate the end of the bus, instead of the signal falling off, what does it do? It bounces or reflected. So in a bus, signal bounce is a bad thing. What does it do? It destroys the entire network. So how do I get rid of signal bounce? I get rid of signal bounce by absorbing the signal at the end. What do I use to do that? A terminator. So a terminator is a good thing. Why is a terminator a good thing? Because it avoids or gets rid of signal bounce Signal bounce being a bad thing. Remember, both of those things only apply to a bus. They don't apply to any other topology. Hint, hint, hint. You might want to know this for a test. This is not the review. I'm just stressing what's important. And again, we saw this last week or last time we met. A few people were absent last time. They should be taking copious notes, frantically scribbling. Let's keep going. Okay. The star is the good one. That's the one we use all the time. A switch in the middle. You see why this looks like a star. So here it is. Star, using a central device to connect computers. That's the good one. That's the one we use all the time. That's the one we want to do. If you go back to Bergen, everything's wired how? As a star. Faster than a bus, centralized monitoring, and easier to upgrade. Right? That's the standard one we use all the time. And you all see why it looks like a star. It radiates out like a star. They make a point that the central device can be used for monitoring stuff. You can see how many frames per second went by and all that kind of stuff. And if the number of workstations you need gets bigger, you simply replace. So if this is an 8-port switch and we want 16, we take this out and put it in a 16-port switch. That's all we do. Right? So one more time, the bus we never use, the star we always use. Extended star, hierarchical star. This is a star of stars. I got 4 stars that are then starred together. So I can keep expanding a star by starring all the stars and keep expanding it. It's called an extended star, and it's called a hierarchical star. This middle dot, a central device, usually a switch that's in the middle. Instead of attaching computers, I put other stars. So star, 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 and I put them in a star. That's an extended star or hierarchical star. Very common and very useful, and we use it all the time. That's a good one. Okay? I want to go slow enough so we got it, but not too slow, because I got to do stuff at the end and I want to slow down for it. Skip this. Okay, a star is good in every way. What's the one disadvantage of a star? The second dot. The one disadvantage of the star is that central device, the switch. If that fails, you're toast. So if that star fails in the middle, you're toast. And that's a big deal. So be careful with that switch. Don't let people kick the plug out, and always have a spare on hand. Only disadvantage to a star is that central device. Okay, here we go. This is an important one. It could be on a test, hint, hint. We have a bus. They go back and forth. At the end, if we leave it unterminated, what happens? The signal will bounce back. What do we do in a bus? We terminate the 2 ends. Is there another way to prevent signal bounce? Read the second line. So instead of terminating each end, what do? I bring the ends around. Instead of terminating, I bring them around to form a complete circle. Now I have a giant ring, but I don't have a terminated end. So an unterminated end isn't there. I got rid of an unterminated end this way by putting a termination on each end. Another way is to just complete the circle. I don't need a termination, but I haven't got an unterminated. Therefore, I still got rid of signal bounce a different way. But what did I make? A circle, which is called a what? A ring. So know that what a ring is and understand this dot, this thing here. It's another way to prevent signal bounce. The ring is still used, not a lot, but it's still around. Bus never used anymore. Star always used. Ring used occasionally. Okay? I don't want to go too fast, but I don't want to go too slow either, because I want to get rid of this stuff. I'm not worried about FDDI using dual ring. Look, here's the thing in the top 2. If any one in the ring breaks, the whole network's down, just like a bus. So what they do with dual ring, they use 2 rings. Well, there are methods that only use 1 ring. If you're using 1 ring and the ring breaks, you're screwed. If you got 2 rings and 1 ring breaks, you're okay. If both ring breaks, you're still screwed. You know what I mean? I'm not pushing that right now. Understand what a ring is. Now, the last one, of course, is the point-to-point or mesh. So they're doing point-to-point as building to building. But if I plug my computer into your computer directly, just me to you directly plugged into your computer, that would be point-to-point also. I'm going to skip point to multipoint. I'm getting tired of it. So a mesh topology. That's the one, remember, we had a star, bus, a ring. What was the last one? The mesh. So if we're sitting in a class of, say, 35 people, and I plug into you, and you plug into him, and she plugs into him, and you all plug directly into each other, that would be a mesh. That's a very fail-safe, meaning that there's always some way to get from one computer to another because there's so many redundant paths. There's a big cuidado. If we did that in the classroom, it's crazy. We'd have a mat of wires this big. So we never use the mesh in a classroom wiring up computers. But what is a mesh? Every computer has a direct connection to every other one. Well, therefore, we never use it, right? Well, that's not true. The bottom one. We use it in one place, and here's the place we use it. In a wide area network or in an internet, look what happens. Chicago, direct connection to New York, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. Phoenix, direct connection to Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. Everyone has a direct connection to every other one. That's a mesh, and that's where it is used. Everyone has a direct connection. So several ways to get there. New York and Los Angeles would probably use this link most of the time. If this link failed, I could go some other way. You know what I mean? We normally use this link if it was up there. If it failed, we take a southern route or a northern route. Mesh, this is the mesh topology. It's never used in a classroom to wire, but it is used this way. So let me stop before I get to this. So 5 or 6 slides ago, which I want to go back to, what do we had? We had the bus, and we know all about the bus and signal bounce and termination. We had the star, and we know the star is the one we use all the time. That's the good one. We have extended star, hierarchical star. Then we had the ring. The ring is we bring it into a circle. We get rid of the unterminated end by completing it. So the ring does what the bus does, except better. And then finally, we had the mesh. And what was the mesh? That's the one we're all connected to each other. That's never used to physically wire, but it's occasionally used in the wide area network. On my test, know the difference between a star, a bus, a ring, and a mesh. Okay? Now, again, we've done it a second time. Those who were absent last time, and there's a few of them, should have taken excruciatingly copious notes, and I hope you all did. I'm going to slow down now. We're still getting the stuff we covered, but now we're going to slow down and finish the rest of it, okay? And when I'm done, if we finish early, we'll all leave, but we'll finish slightly early, but not real early. All right, let's keep going. Okay, we're now talking about data traveling. And we're talking about how the data travels between logical and physical. And this is a little bit tricky. So let's begin with these two here. In a bus and a ring, logical and physical are the same. Let's explain. If I have a bus, how does it look? It's a long wire like this. How do you think the data travels in that wire? It travels like this. Why doesn't it travel some other way? There's no other way for it to travel. The wire is like this. The data's got to travel like this. So in a bus, logical, physical are the same. Now let's try the next one. Ring. What does a ring look like? It's a giant circle. How do you think the data travels in a ring? Like a giant circle. Why doesn't the data travel some other way? How else could it travel? It's got to travel in a circle. Same thing. But give me a drum roll. For this one, there's a problem. Okay, the star. Let's begin. Here's a star. We're wired like a star. We're plugged in. But what happens is inside here, the data is flowing like a bus. So this would be a physically wired star that's acting logically like a bus. It's a physically wired star that's acting logically like a bus. So here's a case where the physical and logical might be different. With a ring, they can't be different. The circle, the data's got to travel in a circle. There's no, here it can be different. But the cuidado is, and let's stop on this one. This is the famous one. Here we're wired like a star the same way. It's a physical star. But I'm telling you, the data is flowing in and out like a ring. It's flowing out of this and up through here and back out here and up through here and back out here. It's flowing like a ring. This is the famous IBM token ring. Okay? So it's a physically wired star that's acting logically like a ring. Now, how would you know it in this case? Well, in this case, the device you'd buy is an MAU, a multi-station access unit, and would probably be labeled IBM Token Ring Multi-Station Access Unit. Well, then you know that even though you plug it in like a star, the data is going to flow like a ring. Okay? Those are the two examples when logical and physical topology could, would, or might be different. I hope you're enjoying this because we're never doing this lecture again. Next week we're good. Gomez, good to see you. I'm going to mark you in. Pay close attention. In this case, we're talking about a star logical. Look, when you plug in, you got physical. When no data is transferred, it's logical. When you're moving data, when no data is transferring, it's physical but not logical. When you're moving data, then it's logical. Give me a second to do something. Okay. So in this case, we got 6 physicals, no logical. In this case, we got 6 physicals on what? 2 logical, because these two guys are talking. 6 physicals, no logical, 6 physicals, and 2 logical, these two guys are talking. The dotted line is deceptive. It means these two guys are thinking of talking. When 1 and 6 start to talk, then we'll have 6 physicals and 4 logicals. Right now, we only have 6 physicals and 2 logicals. Because 6 and 1 aren't talking yet, they're just thinking of it. Again, my favorite thing, Peter Piper picked a peck of, I'm skipping this. Again, just a quick hint for those asking questions. I'm telling you, next week's a review, and the week after that's a test. When we start next week, we're going to start with Chapter 4. And Chapter 4 is going to be a mother-stickingly long chapter on different kinds of wires. What's different from untwisted pair, what's different from fiber optic. You're going to have to know all that, but that will be on the next test, the Halloween test. So we'll be covering it next week, but you won't need to know it for this test. So I'm skipping this slide now. Now, even though I covered this last time, let's pause. Hint, hint, hint. There could be several questions from this slide. So let's begin. Baseband sends digital signals, broadband uses analog signals. Does everybody understand code? Then an analog signal is the actual voice wave. And a digital signal is simply a 1 or a 0 on or off. So if I've got the sound wave of Elvis Presley singing, that would be an analog signal. If I've got a logic 1 or a logic 0, that would be a digital signal. 2 possibilities, digital signal. Different values in a voice wave, analog signal. Baseband is digital. And that's what we're going to get to when we did the 10 base T stuff. Baseband is digital. Broadband is analog. Broadband is the actual wave. Know this on my test. Okay, and we covered it last time, but I'm slowing down to cover it again. I'm going to go pretty slow for the rest of this because this is new material. We'll be out of here by 4:15 or so. A little after 4:15, but I'm going to slow way down because we need a lot of this stuff. Okay, there will be questions on Ethernet. So Ethernet is what's called the local area technology, meaning when I plug into your computer, how am I talking to you? Well, I'm using the protocol TCP/IP, but the technology I'm using to talk to you, I'm using Ethernet technology. So I'm using the protocol TCP/IP, but the technology I'm using to communicate from my computer to yours is Ethernet. It's been around since the 1970s. It can operate on a star or a bus. It can operate at all kinds of speeds. Okay, so Ethernet's always all the time. That's not what's on the test. Okay, this should, drum roll again. Everybody in this class should be an expert in MAC addresses. And this MAC address slide is no different than the MAC address slide that we had in Chapter 2 and the one we had in Chapter 1. It's the same 48-bit binary addresses. Big hint, hint, hint. There will be several questions on my upcoming test on MAC addresses. You better know them cold, okay? They're expressed in hexadecimal, okay? The dot down below, the third one, what's FFFF? Well, hexadecimal F is 4 ones. The binary equivalent of hexadecimal F is 4 ones. So what is that? That's 4 ones, 4 ones, 4 ones. What's this thing? That's 48 mother-sticking ones. If I have 48 mother-sticking ones, what does that mean? That's the broadcast address. That's the calling all cars address. That means I will take in this one. I will absorb all the frames to my address, or all the frames addressed to all ones. Okay. So even though we have another MAC address slide, it's the same MAC address we covered in the other 2 chapters. Please know your MAC addresses. Okay, let's slow down on this one again. I covered it, but I want to slow down. A frame can be any size at all, but an Ethernet frame can't be more than 1518. We're doing the bottom one first. Now, that's not 1518 ones and zeros. That's 1518 bytes. That means 1518 characters. 1,518 characters is the largest size an Ethernet frame can be. Any frame can be bigger than that, but since you're never going to see any frame that's not Ethernet, you're never going to see a frame bigger than 1518 bytes. Again, how do we get a frame? We take a packet and frame it. What do? We put this to and from MAC address in front of it, and we put the error checking at the end of it. So here's a packet. We framed it with the to and from MAC address in front of it and the error checking in the back of it. That is a frame. This one up here, Ethernet Roman numeral 2. That's not Ethernet II. That's the frame type used by TCP/IP. Now, that's a little bit tricky. It says here there's 4 different frame types. But I think even if you read the book, I don't think the book even tells you what those frame types are. And the reason is there are 4 different frame types. But since the only protocol we ever use is TCP/IP, the only frame type we ever need to know is Ethernet Roman numeral 2. So you'll always see an Ethernet Roman numeral 2 frame type packet, a frame, and you'll always see one that's, now it may not always be 1518 bytes. It can be less than that. It just can't be bigger than that. It can be smaller than that, yes. It can be bigger than that, never. Know everything on this slide. All right. See how I'm slowing down. We'll be out of here by 4:15. Okay, the brilliant young lady who had the question at the beginning of class. So Ethernet only uses what's called CSMA/CD. Do you have to know this for my test? Yes, absolutely. So what is it? I'll give you my example again. You've agreed to drive me home because I don't have a car. So we're pulling out onto Paramus Road, and I say, look, dumb student, I need to get home. Pull out into traffic. And you say, well, look, you may be the professor, but I got to wait for a hole in the traffic or I'll crash my car. So when you tell the Ethernet NIC card to send some data, NIC card says, you may be telling me to send, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to listen before I send. I'm only going to send the data when I hear silence. That's the carrier sense part of it, okay? If I hear the silence, then I'll send. Carrier sense multiple access. NIC card's only going to send a frame when it hears a space to send. And that's really the lecture. Here's the tricky part that many people don't get. Once in a great while, if 2 or more hear silence, they'll transmit at the same time. They did the right thing. I saw a gap and I sent data. You saw a gap and you sent data. That data collided and crashed. So if 2 or more stations transmit and a collision occurs, I need a way to detect that collision and then resend the data. So carrier sense multiple access with collision detection is how Ethernet, it's called the media access method. It's how Ethernet accesses the network. And the young lady who asked the question and everybody, you do have to know this for my test, and you do have to know how it works. Ethernet is CSMA/CD. CSMA/CD is Ethernet. I'm pausing to get my breath, but I'm also pausing to make sure we all have this, because I'm not doing it ever again. Okay, we're moving along nicely. We're moving along slowly, but this will be on the test. Okay, the middle one. Well, the bottom one, whatever. Let me just do it this way. Here's you'll understand it better. Everything in here could collide with everything in here. Why? We made a LAN using hubs. Remember, hubs sent everybody. So he could collide with him, and he could collide with him, and he could collide with him. Now let's try this one. This guy might collide with this guy, and this guy might collide with this guy. But here's what happened. There's no way this guy could ever collide with this guy. And why? Because they're going through a switch. And switches separate. Remember we said the switch only sends to you, only sends to you. So here's the blah, blah, blah. Switches separate collision domains, and every port on a switch is a separate collision domain. One more time. Switches separate collision domains. Each port on a switch is a separate collision domain. Hubs do not separate collision domains, and every port on a hub is the same collision domain. Therefore, what we're really saying in plain English is you'll never have a collision if you go through switches, but you may have lots of collisions if you go through hubs. I'm pausing again to make sure we got it. I've done this before with this class, but I want to make sure it's pumping in. And I got 2 or 3 people here who were not here last time. Those people should be taking frantic notes, because one more time, as much as I love this class, we're never doing this lecture again. Actually, the lectures near the end are harder, but they're also more interesting. So I think you're going to like the class when we get to the second half. Not that this stuff isn't important. You really have to know these terms, but they're kind of tedious. Okay, another thing that's on the test, the bottom dot. Let's review something. How do we make a frame? We make a frame by taking the packet. We put the MAC address to and from on the front. What do we put in the tail end of the frame? The error checking. Well, the thing we put at the tail end of the frame to do the error checking is, give me a drum roll, the cyclical redundancy check. The cyclical redundancy check is the thing, the error checking code that we put in the trailer of the frame. What do? We had a packet. We frame the packet. The front is the to and from MAC address. What's in the end of the packet? The error checking code called the cyclical redundancy check. What does it do? It determines the date is unchanged. Big cuidado. It will detect a damaged packet. It is not able to detect a lost packet. One more time. It will detect a damaged, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. It will detect a damaged frame, but it will not detect a lost frame because you won't know if it's lost. Where? It's at the end of the frame. So when you get it, you'll know the frame was damaged or not. If you don't get the entire frame, you don't get the CRC either. All right? Understand what the CRC is, where we put it, and what it's used for. I'm just looking at my watch, pausing, getting my breath, and slowing down. And this would be on the test. Okay, people who weren't here last time should be taking unbelievable notes. Okay, I'm going to talk about this slide because it's kind of interesting. Half duplex is a 2-way radio. Full duplex means I can talk both ways at the same time. But look what it says here. In a full duplex switch, CSMA CD is turned off. Well, why? Well, what do we say? If you go through a switch, switches separate collision domains. If you go through a switch, you couldn't have a collision. So if I'm going to you through a switch, I don't need no collision detection because there's no collision to detect. It's impossible to have one. Now, big cuidado. If I'm going through a hub, we might have a collision. Then you better have CSMA CD turned on. If I'm going through a switch, I wouldn't need it. Know that a switch is full duplex, meaning when I'm sending to you, you can send back to me simultaneously. With a hub, if I'm sending to you, you got to shut up. And if you're sending to me, I got to shut up. And again, why can I turn off CSMA CD? Because it's detect collisions. And in a switch, I couldn't have any collisions that would need detecting. Okay. I hope you're catching on to this course in a different way. I keep saying Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. This whole course is techno-babble, techno-terminology. If you can learn this, it's got 3 dividends. 1, you'll pass my test. 2, you might get through and pass the certification test and get yourself a CompTIA cert. But the most important one is if you know these terms and somebody has a job interview, they don't just look to see if you have a tie on and took a bath. They ask stuff in a job interview. So if you know the difference between a hub and a switch and what a collision is and all this, you're going to look much better than the guy who drools and babbles and has nothing to say. So knowing this stuff in a job interview will get you the job. Okay, this is the tough part that people don't like. It says, this makes the speed, this is the type, and this is the type of media. Well, that's meaningless. Let's try it. 10 base T, Ethernet. That means it's baseband transmission. Now, what did we say baseband transmission was? That's ones and zeros. That's digital. So we're using baseband transmission. Now, what is the T? The T is the kind of wire. T is twisted pair. So we're using baseband transmission over twisted pair. But here's the cuidado. What is the 10? Well, the 10 is the speed. Oh, that's 10 bits per second. No, it's not. Remember that. That's the speed. That's 10 million bits per second. So we're doing baseband transmission over twisted pair wire at a speed of 10 million bits per second. That's how we express Ethernet. I call it Ethernetese. That's how we talk Ethernet. Now, the bad news and the good news is there's a whole bunch of slides that are going to sort of reinforce this. And since I have nothing else to do, we have plenty of time, we're going to do those slides. Let's go nice and slow. So let's take the top one. What's 100 base TX? Well, we know that base is baseband transmission. What we say T was. T is twisted pair. That's a special kind of twisted pair, but it's baseband transmission over twisted pair. What's the 100 at the beginning? That's the speed. Well, write this down. It's 100 bits per second, right? No, it's not. It's not 100 bits per second. It's 100 million bits per second. So that 100 in the top is the speed, 100 million bits per second, baseband transmission, meaning ones and zeros, over some kind of twisted pair wire. This category 5 or 6, skip that for now. We're going to take that up in our media lecture, which is next week. So next week I'm going to do an entire lecture on just wires, and that will be on the upcoming test. We're done. We can all go home, right? Let's keep going. Okay, the top one, 100 million bits per second, baseband transmission. Well, what does F stand for? Well, F stands for fiber optics. So this time we're saying it's baseband transmission at 100 million bits per second, but we're going to put on a fiber optic wire, not a twisted pair wire. Now, give me a drum roll. Here's where it gets very sexy. Let's take the bottom one. This is still baseband transmission, right? It's still over twisted pair wire, right? Well, what about this 1,000? My mouse is always screwed up. What about this 1,000? 1,000 bits per second, right? Well, let's do a big cuidado on this. That's not 1,000 bits per second. That's 1,000 million bits per second. Now, if in the bank you had $1,000 million, what would you have? You would have $1 billion. So 1,000 million bits per second is 1 billion bits per second, and that's known as gigabit Ethernet. Again, over twisted pair wire, I'm sending ones and zeros at not 1,000 bits per second, but 1,000 million bits per second. That is gigabit Ethernet. Do you see that even though each one changes, it's always the speed, the baseband transmission, and the kind of wire? Speed, baseband transmission, kind of wire. It's always those in that order. Okay? Now, they got a little lazy here, but it works. 10G means 10 billion. What they could have done is 10,000. That would be 10,000 million or 10 billion. They just did 10G for 10 billion. But you can still run baseband transmission over twisted pair at 10 billion ones and zeros per second. That always kind of impresses me. That's 10 times faster than gigabit Ethernet. 100 base T, we're going backwards. That's still only 100. It's not 100 bits per second. It's 100 million, but it's less than billion. And T4 just means we're using all 4 pairs. It's still twisted pair wire. Now, here's where it gets a little unusual. 1,000 base. Baseband transmission. 1,000 is still 1,000 million, still gigabits. Well, wait a minute. All we had was T and F. What's L? L stands for long wave laser, and a laser beam is only used with light. So this is another form of fiber optic. Long wave laser is another form of light, which is another form of fiber optic. Okay? But it's still 1,000 million. It's still a gigabit Ethernet. I don't like the rest coming up, but I'm going to do them. Base SX, that's shortwave laser. Laser beam is still fiber optic. See what I mean? So LX and SX is still fiber optic. 1,000 still means not 1,000 bits, but 1,000 million. Still gigabit Ethernet. Now the bottom one I don't like at all. It's 1,000 million baseband, but it's CX, that's copper wire. So you say, why didn't they just say twisted pair? Well, twisted pair is the normal copper wire. This is not twisted pair. It's copper, but it's a special kind of copper. I want you to not so much know each one. That's not. I want you to know the first one's always the speed. The second thing is always baseband, the type of transmission, and the last one is the type of cable. Now, this comes up with something, first of all, 10G this, 10G that. That's 10 billion over different kinds of fiber optic cables because LR and ER are all different kinds of lasers. But the one I want to talk about for a minute is this thing called 802.3. Now, 10 gigabit is 802.3 AE. Don't worry about that. Here's what you do want to know. 802.3 anything is some kind of Ethernet. So 802.3 was one speed, 802.3A is a different speed, 802.3 AE is a different one. But Ethernet is always 802.3 something. 802.3 means Ethernet, and Ethernet means 802.3. This you're gonna lose your shorts on this, but don't worry. No, this is just 40 and 100 are coming. This is the one. Don't worry about memorizing this. You can barely read it, but here's what I'm saying. 802.3 something is this speed. 802.3 something else is this speed. 802.3 something else is this speed. What do they have in common? Every form of Ethernet is some form of 802.3. So whenever you see the term 802.3 anything, that's some form of Ethernet. That's what you want to know. Not that this is this and this is this. I don't care about that. But that 802.3 is some form of Ethernet. Right? We only have a few more slides. I'm going to slow way down because some of these are very difficult and will be on a test. We'll be out of here by 4:15 or so, I think. Okay. Now, I don't think this is on this test, it's on the next one, but it's important. 802.11, on the other hand, is wireless, Wi-Fi. So it's not on this test, it's on the upcoming test. 802.3 anything is some form of Ethernet. 802.11 anything is some form of wireless Wi-Fi or radio wave thing. Now, we may do in another chapter what's 802.3 A, B, and G and how they're different. But in this chapter, all I want to know is that 802.11 anything is some kind of wireless. That's all. Never mind this. I don't want to do it. I'm lazy. Okay, we're going to have a much more detailed on this, but all we want to know here is wireless is radio waves. Even though there's a big garbage here, there's only one thing that's of semi-importance. The frequency that wireless generally uses is 2.4 gigahertz. That's the famous one. Now, a lot of you people, I grew up a different generation than you, but a lot of you people may have played with CB radios, citizen band radios, when you were younger. Well, CB radios are all at a CB frequency. They happen to be 28 megahertz. So 28 megahertz dot so-and-so is channel 1 in CB. 28 megahertz dot something else is channel 2. 28 dot something else is channel 3. So what they're doing here is 2.4 gigahertz is divided into 14 channels. So channel 1 is 2.412 gigahertz. Channel 2 is 2.435 gigahertz. And channel 5 is 2.4 something something. So all we're saying is 2.4 gigahertz is what most Wi-Fi runs at. We don't want to know exact channels, though. We're not worried about that. I'm skipping this because I don't want to do it. Okay, pay close attention to this slide. I'm going to take about 5 minutes on the slide. So let's begin with the top one. The young lady who asked me the question at the beginning of the pay close attention. What do I use with Ethernet? I use CSMA CD. Why? If I detect a collision, I want to resend the frame so it doesn't get lost. Well, wireless is still a form of Ethernet. In other words, just because we went on the air, just because we went through radio waves, we're still using Ethernet. One more time. We normally go through wires. Now we're going wirelessly. Did we switch to something else? No, we're still using Ethernet, but we're doing wireless Ethernet. But there's a problem with wireless Ethernet, and here's what it is. The way CSMA CD works is, first I carrier sense multiple access. That means I listen for silence. I got to hear the fact that nobody else is sending. With radio waves, that's hard to do. Somebody might be sending over there and I don't hear it. I can't always hear what's being sent with radio waves. First problem. And the second problem, and this I'm not going to explain to you, you just have to take my word for it. In a wire, I can detect a collision and resend. In a radio wave, if there was a collision, I wouldn't know about it. So 2 problems. When I go to radio waves, I'm listening for silence before I send. I can't hear the silence. I don't know if somebody else is sending. And the second thing is if there's a collision, I'm going to detect it and resend. With radio waves, I can't detect it. So now I'm totally screwed. What if I want to send Ethernet wirelessly, but I can't use CSMA CD? What do I do? Well, what I do is I use something like it. I use CSMA CA. And the CA, for the young lady who asked the question, is collision avoidance. So CSMAC stands for this: carrier sense multiple access with collision avoidance instead of collision detection. So what we're going to do is I'm going to avoid the collisions and I'm not going to detect them. Now, the very bright students are going to say, "Oh, professor, wait a minute. If you could avoid collisions to begin with, what are you bothering with this piece of garbage for? You're detecting and resending. You found a way to avoid the collisions. You can get rid of the CD." Well, not really, and I'll tell you why. Collision avoidance always works until it doesn't. So here's how collision avoidance works. When the signal is listening for silence and it hears silence, it says, "I'm hearing silence, but I'm not sure if that's real silence." Now, for CSMA CD, I could just send. So because I'm not sure what I'm doing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send what I call an intent to send, meaning I heard silence and, hey, I'm Gary, I'm going to send. Now, your computer hears the same silence and you're about to send, but you hear my computer say, "Wait a minute, I'm Gary, I'm going to send." Hey, I better wait. Now, the next time we get together, we're both listening, you say, "I'm Zelda, I'm going to send." I'm about to send and I hear that you're going to send. I say, "No, I'll wait." So by doing that, we avoid the collisions. Here's the big cuidado. If something goes wrong and I don't hear your intent to send, you don't hear my intent to send, and we both send, we're going to get a collision. We can't detect that collision. We simply lose that data. So collision avoidance is perfect and always works until it doesn't work. But here's what I want to know for the test. Wired Ethernet always uses CSMA CD, and I think we know from the young lady's question at the beginning and everything how carrier sense multiple access collision detection works. And wired Ethernet has to use it. Wireless Ethernet cannot use it. So wireless Ethernet must settle for using CSMA CA collision avoidance. Wired Ethernet uses CSMA CD. Wireless Ethernet must use CSMA CA. And again, it sounds like a better method, but actually it's a sort of scotch tape and rubber band method to do the best I can. CSMA CA always works until it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, there's nothing we can do about it, and we just lose the frame. One last time. Wired Ethernet, CSMA CD. Wireless Ethernet, CSMA CA. Know that on my test. The silence, I'm assuming, means there's no questions. Also, though, let's go down here. This RTS CTS is the same one we learned in Chapter 2, which is also on the test. So if you remember, the device says to the access point, "Almighty access point, am I allowed to send to you?" That's the request to send. The access point says, "Okay, only you're clear to send, only you're clear to send." That's the clear to send. So the request to send is from the device to the access point saying, "Can I talk to you?" The clear to send is from the access point back to the device saying, "Yes, you can talk to me." You do have to know that from Chapter 2. It's the same one. You still have to know it. See what I mean? They're just repeating it. You begin to see how a lot of stuff from Chapter 2 comes up again in Chapter 3. The bottom dot of this, with all this extra chatter, the throughput's cut in half. The CSMA CA with the intent to send, the RTS CTS, all that stuff takes time. That's what slows wireless down. So the CSMA CA with the intent to send, I got to go out of my way to do it. That slows me down. The request to send, clear to send, I got to go through that kabuki dance. That slows me down. With all that, that's my wireless is slower. I'm going to move on in a minute. There are several questions from this slide alone. And I'm assuming that the dead silence means nobody has a question. We'll be done in a very few minutes. Okay, we're near the end. You see what's happening now? Very few slides to go, but each slide is I hope you're enjoying this because we ain't ever doing it again. I'm going to not do this for several reasons. I think we're getting near the end. I think we're all getting tired. So I'm going to go to another slide, and we're going to finish this in about 5 or 10 minutes because I'm getting tired of talking. The slide I'd like to talk about, though, is this one. I just want to see where I'm going. Yeah, I'll go to some other stuff in a minute. Yeah. The slide I really want to talk about is this one here. All of them are important, but I'm going to do the top two. Let's start the middle one, throughput. Okay. Miss Zelda, could you tell me how your internet's rated? Oh, I pay a lot of money. I get 100 million bits per second. Not me, I get gigabit Ethernet. Not me, I get 5 million bits per second because I pay a lot of money. Well, you know what that is? That's your data rate that you're paying for. So if I say, how do you like your new car? Oh, it's a great car. I get great miles per gallon. Gee, I'm reading on the side that you're getting, 30 miles to the gallon. Well, yeah, I do sort of. I really get 24 or 25. The throughput is the actual speed of your data, not the intended speed. So if your internet is rated at such and such a speed, that's the data rate. The throughput is how fast does it actually go? You see what I mean? How fast does your data actually travel? What's the actual speed of your data? That's the throughput. The data rate, what should it be? The throughput is what is it actually? That's the throughput. And that's very important because it's more important to know the actual miles per gallon in your car than what the manufacturer says you're going to get. It's more important to know the actual top speed of your car than what the manufacturer says on the paper. See what I mean? So that's what you want to know. Now, the one that I always get upset about is the top one, the signal to noise ratio, because I think it's so easy and students screw it up. You're listening to the radio. You want to hear the radio. That's the signal. Well, if there's a lot of noise in the background, you can't hear it. So the signal to noise ratio is you want to have a lot of signal and very low noise. Now let's do it again. I'm listening to the radio. If my noise is at this level, but my signal's way up here, I can hear the radio well. I hear it really good. But if my noise is at this level and the signal's way down here, I can't hear the signal at all. It's below the noise. The sexy one is this. The noise is at this level and the signal is just above it. Now I got a problem. Is the signal above the noise? Yes, it is. Is it well above the noise? Well, no, I got to keep listening. I can barely hear this thing. See what I mean? So a signal to noise ratio, it's the amount of noise compared with the signal strength. Here it is, and people get it wrong. Signal's good, noise is bad. I want a high signal and a low noise. Now, in an ideal situation, if I have an improper thing, we'll lower the noise and raise the signal. Well, here's the problem. Noise you're stuck with. If you're in a noisy environment, it would be great to lower the noise, but you often can't. So what you do is you measure the noise. It's wherever it is. You say, geez, I hate this noise. Yeah, but you can't do anything about it. You got it. So what do you got to do? You got to raise the signal above the noise. My point is signal good, noise bad. High signal, low noise. We want the signal to be above the noise, not the noise to be above the signal. So a good signal to noise ratio would be a very high signal and a very low noise. A good signal to noise ratio would be a very high signal and a very low noise. Okay? I'll spend 1 minute on this and then we're going to just stop. Radio waves do crazy things. When a signal goes through a wire, you can only do one thing. The further the signal goes through the wire, the lower it gets. Signals go through a wire, they lose strength. That's called attenuation. But radio waves are going all over. They can be absorbed, they can be refracted, reflected, all this other stuff. So radio waves, absorption is the easy one. If a radio wave goes through the wall of your house, it gets a little weaker. If the radio wave goes through the wall of your car, it gets a little weaker. So that's called absorption. Reflection says the radio wave bounces off something. I'm going backwards here. Bounces off something. Refraction is a little bit trickier. The radio wave bends. If the radio wave goes from dry air to moist air, if it goes from hot air to cold air, it keeps going, but it doesn't go in a straight line. It bends, or it goes down, it goes up. That's refraction. And scattering is simply that it blows apart. Now, none of this will be on the test, but here's what I'm after. Radio waves can be messed up. Well, how can it be messed up? They can be absorbed, they can be refracted, they can be reflected, they can be scattered. If I send a radio signal, lots of stuff can happen to it. That's all. So these are common types of radio signal interference. By the way, are they good or bad? They're all completely bad. Well, why do we have them? We have them because we're stuck with it. If you go out to go on a picnic and it rains, you're going to get wet. Is that good or bad? It just is. It rained on your picnic, you got wet. So if you send a radio wave and it gets scattered or refracted or reflected, tough bananas. That's what radio waves do. That's just another problem with doing stuff at radio waves. None of this stuff will be on this upcoming test, though. It might be on another test some other time. All right, I think we're going to just stop, but let me just do this. We're a little early, but I don't feel badly. All right, so one more time for those who are late. Sometime next week, and I know what date it is if you want, next Wednesday, a week from today, we're going to do a formal review. So the way I'll do it is the first half will be a lecture, and I'll break in the middle and say, this is it, and I'll spend about 20 minutes making review points. And then the Monday after, we'll be having the test. If somebody wants to know the dates, I'll just give them to you now. The review will be on the 30th, September 30th, and the test will be on October 5th. The review will be on September 30th, and the test will be on October 5th, and the test will not be in class, it will be online on Moodle. So review on the 30th, which is a week from today, and the test would be on October 5th, which is the first Monday in. Oh, and there's a reason why I'm doing that, by the way, for all the geniuses, the people who are smart. I could review on a Monday and have a test on a Wednesday, but I prefer to review on a Wednesday and have a test the following Monday, so those few people who want to study have the entire weekend to do it. See what I mean? So that'll be that, and you'll have your first test by October 5th, and that will be 1/4 of your grade. For those who care, the smart people, the second test will be sometime just before Halloween. And the second test will be on chapter 4, 5, and 6. So the first test will be on chapter 1 and 2 and 3, even though we will have covered part of chapter 4 and part of chapter 5. By the time you take the test will only be on chapter 1, 2, and 3. So this coming Monday, we'll go right into chapter 4 like it's regular stuff. This coming Wednesday, we'll do a review on this. And the following Monday, when you take the test, will already be lecturing on chapter 5. Okay? And you'll need 4, 5, and 6 for the next test around Halloween. I think that's it. Anybody have any questions? I'll do what I always do. If you want to leave, you can, but I'll sit here for a good 10 or 15 minutes. If anybody wants to talk to me or throw tomatoes at me.
Professor, how many questions are on the test?
That I forgot. Most of my tests are 30 questions. Since I'm doing it on Moodle, I think it's more like 20. Because I'm having trouble doing this whole thing. I think it's around 20 questions.
Okay. All right, cool.
Okay. See you Monday, but I'm staying.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes, what? What?
No, I said thank you. Have a good afternoon.
I'll see you Monday.
Question, Professor.
Yes, what?
So just to make sure, confirm, the CMSA is the wireless network, and then the CMSD is the wired one, and the
You're saying it funny, but you're right. The CD is the wired one. The CA is the wireless one. That's exactly what you said. CD is the wired Ethernet. CA is the wireless Ethernet. That's correct.
And then the one that you lose data is the CMSA Ethernet wireless.
CSMA-CA is for wireless Ethernet. CSMA-CD is for wired Ethernet. See, they're both Ethernet. If it's wireless Ethernet, CA. If it's wired Ethernet, CD.